So here's a close-up of the arm knitted scarf using Starry Night in Emerald and White Gold in Starbella Luxe. And the one I'm going to show you on camera here is going to be made with Starry Night in Silver Screen and Starbella Luxe in Snowy Night. So to make my scarf, I took one ball of Starry Night and I opened it up like this. I took the rubber band off and I took all of this off the spool. I was standing up when I did so, but I want to hold on to this end and find the opposite end. There are twice the amount of yards in this as there are in the Starbella Luxe, so therefore I can fold this in half and use 2 strands of Starry Night with 1 strand of Starbella Luxe. And this is the same technique I used in the other arm knitted scarf videos where I combined Starbella Luxe, not Starbella Luxe, Starry Night with Starbella lace and flash. So you just take all this off and find the beginning. Okay, then here's the beginning. And what you want to do, it works out better if you're not at a table, if you're standing up. But what you want to do is just find the 2 ends, put them together, and just start a ball with it. So roll the whole thing into a ball, like that. Okay, and I'm going to do mine off camera, and then I'll come back on camera and with all my 3 strands together. So 2 strands are going to be coming from the Starry Night, and then you want to pull from the inside of the Starbella Luxe and find the start of that. And so I'll do that off camera too. And so then you're going to be pulling from the inside here 1 strand, and then you're going to be using your 2 strands of Starry Night to arm knit your scarf. So I have my ball of Starry Night, which is doubled and all wound up. And then I have the inside of my Starbella Luxe yarn coming out of the center. And I have all 3 strands held together as one. And I've measured off 2 yards for my long tail. And this is going to be done with a long tail cast on. So this over here is my working yarn, and this will be referred to as my long tail. So this yarn gets used up during the cast on, and then from that point forward, after you cast it on, you'll only be working with the working yarn. So at the 2 yard mark, you make a slip knot. And to make a slip knot, I make a loop like this. The top strand I fold over the back of the loop like this, and then that back strand there I bring forward like this. You'll notice there's a knot side and a slip side, so I pull on the knot side, and then the slip side I just make it bigger or smaller depending on how big or small the loop is, and I put it up on my arm like that. And that's going to count as my first stitch. So now to cast on with the strands over here and then the working yarn over here, I'm going to go like this and pull up like this, and then I'm going to go on the inside of this loop right here, the loop that's closest to me. I'm going to reach over and grab the other loop, and then I'm going to pull that loop up. That's the loop I want up on my hand, and that's the loop coming from the long tail. I'm going to drop this loop right here, and then I'm going to put this loop up on my arm. So that's the second stitch. Then underneath, I'm going to pull this a little bit like that, and then again I'm going to go like this, pull it up. You see the 2 loops on my hand. I'm going to go on this side of the loop closest to me. I'm gonna, and that's like folding that, it's like twisting it a little bit. I'm going to reach over and get the second loop, let this loop drop down, and put this loop up on my arm. And then on the underside, I'm going to tighten. You don't want to tighten too much. So that's 3 stitches. So then go up here, go on this side of the loop closest to you, reach out to the other loop, let this loop drop, and put this loop up on your arm, and then go underneath and tighten. And then last stitch here, pull this up, go over here like this. You got to go on this side of it, pull that loop up, let this loop drop, put this loop up on your arm. Okay, so there's my 5, and that's what's left over for my long tail. Now I won't be working with this anymore, and what I want to do now is to hold my yarn. I'm always going to be holding it like this. That's the best way to hold it, so you're not tempted to twist your loops. You hold it like that, and all you do is take that set of 3 loops, your first stitch like that, and just drop it over the yarn that you're holding, and this becomes a new loop. So new loop goes over here, and then you tighten. And then again, I'm going to hold it like this. I'm going to take the next set of 3 like this, drop it off. This is the new loop goes over here. And then back over to this hand, the next loop comes off. This is like the old loop off, new loop goes over here. When I was teaching a friend, it really helped to say old loop, new loop. Okay, so back over here, take this set of loops off. You got the new loop right here, and that goes on the opposite arm. So over here, last loop, new loop here, goes over here, and tighten. So that's the end of row 1, and that's how easy that is. Now for row 2, it's the same thing, except I'm going to be going from this arm over to this arm. And you can cast on to any arm. So if you're more comfortable casting on over here, it doesn't make any difference. So right here, you hold this, take these loops, take the new loop, and put that on the opposite arm. Hold this, take the next stitch, drop it down, take the new loop, tighten. Back in this hand, old loop down, new loop, over to the opposite arm. Hold on to the working yarn, take the next set of loops, got the new loop here, the old loop is dropping, and the new loop goes over here. And then you take your working yarn like this, drop your old loop down, take your new loop, and put it on your opposite arm. So that's the end of row 2. So you just keep going back and forth like that until you reach the point where you only have, if you want to fringe this, you should go until you have about maybe 6 yards left. And if you want to do a cowl, you need to go until you have about 2 yards left. And the one thing that I could have done before I even started, if I know that I want a fringe scarf, would be to measure off my fringe first. And in the links below, I'll have links to the pattern where you'll know how long to measure off for your fringe. So that completes row 2. So just continue back and forth like that until you have 2 yards if you want to make a cowl, or 6 yards if you want to make fringe. And I will come back on camera and show you how to bind off and do the fringe and sew it together if that's what you want to do. So here is how my scarf ended up looking, and I love the combination of these two colors. The scarf is about 5 feet long, and I stopped short of 6 feet of yarn so that I could have 4 feet for the fringe and another 2 feet for the bind off. So my loops landed up on this arm, but they could have just as easily landed up over here. So it doesn't matter which arm you bind off from. So to bind off, you take your working yarn and you knit 2 stitches over to the opposite arm. So you hold your arm just like this, and then you work this loop off right here, take the new loop, put it over here and tighten, back over here, knit the next stitch off like this, move the new loop over to here, just like that. Once you have the 2 loops on there, then you can take the first loop and move it over the second loop like this and let that drop. So now this one's bound off. So now you pick this up, knit the next one off over here, and move that new loop over to the opposite arm, and then you tighten. You take the previous loop, move it over the new loop, and let that drop off. Then you pick this back up again, you knit the next stitch off, just like this, move the new loop over here, and tighten. You want to make sure you have all 3 strands. Starting to feel like I don't. This kind of got curled up in there, so you want to be careful of that happening. And then I want to make sure I've got my, which I feel like something dropped here. It did. Alright, I'm going to fix this real quick. Have this go up in there. I think that fixes it. Okay, you take the previous loop right here, you drop it over the new loop and let that drop. Take your working yarn, knit off the last loop, put the new loop over here, tighten, and then you want to take the previous loop here, drop it off over that loop, and now I have just enough left. I'm going to cut the remaining yarn off. I'm going to leave a long end. So if you want to sew this together, you need to leave a long end, probably about 18 inches. If you're going to do fringe, you need about 8 inches. So on the very last loop, you hold your cut strand right here, and you just pull that loop over the cut strand and pull that strand all the way through. Then when you pull this here, it locks it. So that's how you make the scarf. Now, if you want to sew this together as a cowl, what you want to do is match up the wrong side with the wrong sides. So the wrong side looks like that, and the right side, the knit stitch, looks like this, and it's got the ovals. So you want to sew this together on the back side, which is the purl side. And so you bring your wrong sides together and then you match them up. So the way this worked out, there's 2 ends that are side by side here, and if that happens, that's great. You can knot these together and then just sew back and forth between these stitches from the cast on and the bind off, and then hide all of these into your work, and you can just do that with your hands. And even if they're on opposite sides, just weave that in and weave this in, or weave it one down to the other one and then tie them together and then weave in your ends. But if you want to make fringe, which is what we're going to do with the scarf, you can just go ahead and leave this tail and I'll work it into the fringe. And I have a piece of cardboard here, and it's 6 inches wide and 8 inches tall. And what I did with the triple strand of yarn was just to wrap it around here 10 times, but I held 3 strands together. So I want 10 fringes that are 8 inches long, and I'm going to put 5 on each side. But I've already got my fringe cut right here. So I'll get this out of the way. So here's all my fringe that I have cut. Let me get this out of the way. And my scissors. So I use a big crochet hook, and I'm going to go right here where this end is. The good thing about a fringe, about fringing the scarf instead of making a cowl, is you don't have to worry about sewing the sides together. So I'm going to go underneath 2 sets of loops here. I'm going to take 2 strands of Starry Night and hold it together with 1 strand of Starbella, like that. And then I'm going to fold them in half. I just bring the ends together. And then on the fold side, I'll hold it right like that. And I bring my crochet hook, I'm going to bring it from the wrong side to the right side through 2 sets of loops on the bottom. And I'm really close to where I finish this off. Then I'm going to put that fold over my hook. I'm going to bring it to the wrong side like this and bring it out a couple of inches. Then I'm going to open up this loop, and at this point I could actually take the crochet hook out and just open up the loop like this and grab all the strands, and then you can grab the cut off end right here and bring that through that fold, and then you just pull all of them. You have a nice little neat bar running across like that. And then when you get down here, that end is secured in the fringe, and you just cut it down at the bottom. And I kind of like these cut at all jagged lengths, and I like leaving it that way, but you could trim the whole thing off when you get it done. So let me do one more fringe to show you. So I've got 2 strands of Starry Night, 1 strand of Starbella Luxe. Let me see here. And I'm going to fold them in half and go back here. And there's different places where you can put your fringe. When you look at the ovals right here, you could go like right here around the oval and just work around that whole strand right there, or you could turn it and see the loops at the bottom and go into these loops here. Whatever your preference is. But what we did, since there's 5 stitches, we tried to match up the 5 loops at the bottom. So like this one over here, I'm going to go in underneath those 2 strands. You want to get it in like a bulkier place. And I'm going to put the folded side over there. I'm going to bring that through to the wrong side. Then I'm going to take my hook out, and I'm just going to grab the ends and pull it through like that. So you just put 5 on each side, and then you just trim up your fringe. So that's how you make either a cowl or a fringe scarf using Starry Night and Starbella Luxe. Thank you for watching, and the links to everything is listed below. Turn back over here, and I'm going to knit off 1 more stitch like this. Put it over here, tighten over the whole strand of yarn, and then pull that strand of yarn all the way through. And then just for extra security,